Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/The Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. Before we get into the show, I just want to shout out Kayla S., who bought a coffee for Bigfoot Society on Buy Me a Coffee. She writes, "Love your show. Your interviews are amazing, and how you create an open and safe place for others to share their experiences from Alberta, Canada." Thank you, Kyla. I appreciate that. If you'd like to support Bigfoot Society one time, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/Bigfoot Society. And anything I receive there helps me as I start to go through the airports to different places, get something to drink, get something to eat, as I start traveling on the roads to different interviews that might happen in person. That's a way that you can help me get to those goals by a one-time thing. Anyways, thanks, Kyla. Enough chit-chat. Let's get on with the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, we've got the privilege of talking with new friend, Mr. Roger Williams, today from Tennessee. How's it going today, sir?
Going a whole lot better than the last couple of weeks. And it's great to finally get to talk to you.
Oh, for sure. I've been waiting for this for a while, ever since we first connected, but I know you were under the weather, but we're ready to go now. How are things down there in Tennessee, Roger?
Everything's going good. We've got everything's blooming. So we all say we don't have allergies and we're all sneezing and coughing, but yeah, one of my favorite times of the year, though. We spent all day today outside, and the older I get, it takes me a little while to recover from that. I can't run with the kids as much anymore, but going pretty good. Can't complain.
Good to hear. Good to hear. Let's get right into it. Let's start chatting about your encounters that you had over the last few years, and where does this all start for you?
I'm learning things in reverse. I'm 52. I had some things happen, had a sighting when I was 14, had some things happen before that, but we didn't have any way of researching. If you go to the library, back then, it was maybe one or two books, and it would have Loch Ness Monster and UFOs and whatever. But I found that just like other people that had sightings, it never leaves you. You may get away from it for a little while, depending on what's going on in your life, but it never goes away. My sighting and stuff that's happened is not as dramatic as actually some of my friends that I've just found out recently. But we live in southern Middle Tennessee, and there's actually a ridge system that runs in a circle from close to Alabama all the way above Nashville. And what I found is there's been a pretty active ridge system for years. But to get back to how this got started, I'll start when the Finding Bigfoot show was on. I had no idea that show was on. I was cooking for my son one day, and he was about 15. And I guess he was watching YouTube. And so the Ohio How, he played that, and I froze in my tracks. I got chills. I'm like, what are you listening to? And he started explaining, that's Moneymaker. It's a new show. It's the How. Supposedly it's Bigfoot. And I was like, I've heard that a half a dozen times. And the difference is hearing it on speaker versus actually live. You hear this a lot. You feel it. It goes through you. And I believe at that time, when the most activity was going on, there was a company, they were strip mining for phosphate behind our house and where I hunted. And I believe it made this thing mad. It was mad that its home was being torn up. And that's just because before it was other things, but not the screaming. And so I remember the first time I saw one, and I don't know if there were several. I've talked to people lately since I started sharing my story that are local, that seem to be more than one in this area. I always hunted. I was young. We lived out in the country. We didn't stay inside playing video games. It's just something you didn't do. We didn't have all that stuff. And so I would go out and check the fields for deer, wildlife. I just loved being outside. And one particular day, I stepped out in this field beside our house, and I hunted maybe 400 yards around the bend up there. And I had seen my dad, which he was 5'8". I'd seen him walk from that way a lot of times. So I'm looking, there's nothing in the field, and I'm just about to step away, and I noticed movement to my left. I had misremembered, thinking it was about 300 yards. My son and I went back a few weeks ago, and it's no more than 200. But something stepped out on two legs. And at first, the first thing I noticed, of course, was the size. And I had seen the Patty film, and I don't know if it was my young mind thought that's what Bigfoot looks like. That's what all of them look like, or whatever. This one was more athletic, and I wasn't thinking Bigfoot at first, but you have to understand the walkway up this hill I had done a lot of times, and the grass was intertwined. They didn't bush hog it much. They didn't keep it clean. So it was actually the shortest distance to get back to an alfalfa field that I like to hunt. But I would go the long way because of that high grass and walking uphill at the same time. And so it turned its shoulders and looked my way. And I think it knew I was there because I had hunted those woods for years. I was 14. I'd been hunting those woods since I was 8. A lot of times just walking the creeks by myself and just doing kid stuff, and sometimes with my cousins or whatever. But I wasn't scared, I think, because of the distance. But I did notice that if you see someone 100 yards away, 200 yards away, you can see your hat, your skin, the neckline of your color of your clothes, the wrist here, boot line. You know it's a person. You know they're wearing blue jeans. You may not know who they are, but this thing was one color from where I was at, and it was the color of milk chocolate. It wasn't the dark color you hear people, and it wasn't red. It was in between. And so I knew I was seeing something strange. But when it started up the hill, it left no doubt, because I knew how I had to walk up the hill and how I had to maneuver my body to get over this grass, throwing my legs out to the side, up and over. And it was a struggle, leaning forward. This thing started up the hill, had just a little bit of body lean, with the back was more or less straight, but just a little lean. And have you ever seen a walking horse throw its legs up and over? That how they do in the shows. This was the motion of this thing, straight up and over the grass, no struggling. And the time that it took to get from point A to point B, where I would have taken 3 to 5 minutes, this was over in 20 to 30 seconds, which is a long time to get to see something move. And so I didn't panic. And by the time it got to the top of the hill, my mind's just racing. Like, it wasn't the neighbor. It wasn't my dad. And I told my dad about it, and he laughed. He said, it's probably Buford. And Buford was almost 90 years old. And what I had seen had to be one of the best athletes in the world. Going back to that point, I've had people tell me when I describe it that it was probably a teenager as far as Bigfoot goes, because it had wide shoulders, but it was slender at the waist. And I was used to seeing the barrel shape. And I told my dad, I said, I think I saw Bigfoot today. And he laughed it off. And so that was the start of holding it back. And I think a lot of people have found out just recently in the past 3 months since I talked about this for the first time publicly. I've had people come to me. Some of them don't care if people know their name, and some of them have jobs that they're scared to get out, and they have some amazing stories. One of my friends I went to school with in 2008, not far from here, I had the top off the Jeep, the doors off, around midnight, him and his wife driving, and he said this Bigfoot stepped almost into the Jeep and in the path of the Jeep, and they almost hit. Well, Eric, he said he looks up and he can see the Bigfoot flinch. Oh no, I almost got hit. So he went to, and he's been researching this ever since. And he went to the landowner and he said, "Hey, I need to ask you a question." He said, "Okay." He said, "Have you ever seen anything strange around here?" And the next words out of his mouth is, "I've seen the big boy twice." And so I haven't got to go to that spot yet, but that's on my list.
That's incredible. Roger, the first encounter you shared, that's age 14. That's your age 14. Do you mind if I ask a few questions about that? It's a really interesting encounter. So you saw it walk up the hill through the grass in front of you, and then it just kept walking away then?
Yeah, what it was, deer, animals, let's just say animals, they don't want to be seen, most of them. There was what I call a choke point up on top of the hill where there was a gate. And so when it stepped out, I don't think it was expecting me to be there. And so it had a decision to make. And it took the shortest distance to get behind some trees, but also that gate never stayed shut. It was an old farm gate that vines had grown over. So it walked all the way up, and I barely could see it behind those trees and that thicket. But I believe the direction it was going, that's what it did, because the fence row to its left was honeysuckles grown up, vines, it could have, of course, went through if it wanted to, but it took the path of least resistance and the path that was farthest away from me. And yeah, it just walked it was heading toward the back alfalfa field where I had heard the screams later. And so with some other things that had happened, I started putting things together. There was one day, in the South, we don't get a chance to hunt in the snow much. And that's just it. And there was a forecast of some snow on Saturday morning. It was school year. And I was excited. The guy had all my stuff ready the night before. I got up and going by myself. This was before the sighting, so I'm going to say 12 to 13. And I know that sounds strange, but back then in the South, if you were safe, my dad, he trusted me and to go where I said I was going to go and do the right thing. Eat a little breakfast, go outside. It's about 2 to 3 inches of snow, and it's coming down, big flakes. And I'm like, this is amazing. And I go my usual route, which is not too far from the sighting I had later, probably 150, 200 yards. And when I come out of this, it was a logging road, and it opened up into the field, and in the woods where my tree stand, was at the time, they were so dark. It was daylight, but it had this ominous feel when I stepped out at the edge there. And I froze in my tracks, and I'm looking around, and I'm like, what is this? So I tried to take a step forward with my right foot 2 or 3 times, and I couldn't. And in my head, I'm like, this is crazy. Don't be a wimp. You've got a 30-30. You're making this up in your head. I couldn't take another step forward, and my gut just was shaking. My stomach, my insides were just trembling. And I've always listened to my instincts, and I was becoming scared. And something, I don't know why I did this. In my mind, I'm like, if you will let me go, I will turn to my right. I will walk back home, and I won't come back out today. And as soon as I had that thought, it's like I was let go. And the feeling went away. Everything went away. And I turned to my right. I did exactly what I said I was going to do. Walked in the house. My mom and dad, they knew I'd been excited to go. It's 15, 20 minutes later. What are you doing? And I'm like, I lied. I didn't want to say anything. I was like, oh, it's cold out there. I think I'm going to stay in today. And didn't say anything. I didn't tell anybody that for a long time because I wasn't thinking I was thinking I punked out. So you don't tell on yourself for that. But now looking back on it, I don't know. And I don't know about, I've heard so many ideas on what Sasquatch could be. You have the woo side, the natural side. And I've had a lady tell me that the Sasquatch told her that there was a bear and they were protecting me. Going back to my teenage years, I had things happen that I couldn't explain I didn't think much about it, but now there may have been more interactions than I knew because we didn't know about tree knocks. We didn't know about the tree breaks. We didn't know about the whistles. You hear all this stuff and you're learning. You're a young hunter. Hey, something's whistling. It's a bird. It's whatever. But now when we hear something like that, you can tell the difference. Sometimes you can't. Everything's not. I'm not one of those people that everything's not a Bigfoot. If I get a new sound on video or whatever, I've got a friend that's former game warden. I go right to him. Hey, what is this? Do you know what this is? And if he knows, he'll let me know. And then I'll go research that on YouTube. Oh yeah, that's what that is. Good to know. I've been lucky enough that I did. My one resource was my friend Don, that he was a game warden for years around here. He'd had reports. And so when I don't remember how it came up, but I started telling him about this stuff. He encouraged me and he asked me questions, and he didn't make me feel, I guess, bashful about it, because I don't know how it was in all parts of the country, but I heard somebody the other night say country people are like mountain people. You just don't talk about certain things. And that was the attitude I heard. They would say things like, y'all need to be getting in before dark and all that. But I did understand too, some of that was trying to get the kids to just mind and come in. People use that a lot. But so going back, I don't think I'll ever be like some of the shows for entertainment. Oh, that's a squatch or whatever. People that haven't been out in the woods, they want things to be a Sasquatch or whatever, and it's just not the case. But there have been other things that's happened. My mom and dad, my dad had shut me down pretty quick when I told him that story. And it was about no more than 2 years later. They were out. Southern folks back in the day, not much population. They'd get out and they'd drink a beer or two, listen to music or whatever, and just relax or whatever in dirt roads, and never bothered anybody because the houses were so far in between. One night, he got out to relieve himself, and I think my mom might have too. And there was a bank. I think he was told it was about 12 foot high, and then it had a 4-foot fence, and had the car running. The brake lights were shining. The headlights were shining the other way, and he heard a tree snap, a pretty good size, a sapling. He'd been out in the woods his whole life, so immediately he knew it had to be something big. A horse could rub up against something, or a cow, or whatever. But he said it was different. It was just like a snap, like it was just snapped over, just instant break. And the next thing that happened, he heard it take off running, and it sounded like it was on 2 legs. Jumped the fence, landed in the road behind him. He didn't know how far back it was. It was too close, he said. And when it landed in the road, he said it was boom, and he felt it. And my dad was a matter of fact, you got to show me. I never saw him scared of anything. He said he screamed at my mom, "Get in the car now." And he said, Roger, as it was running, it was uphill to them. He said, as it was running, the footfall, when the foot hit the ground, it would kick rocks towards them. And he got in the car, they got in the car and left. So this place is called Simmons Ridge Road. And I just recently asked, we were driving through during the day, and I saw some of the people that have been living there for years. And now I'm not as self-conscious about it, so I'll throw it into a conversation, right? I'm like, hey, you ever seen a Bigfoot? And not all that. Some of them will look at you like you're dumb. Every now and then you get the answer was no, but my brother said he saw one in the field back there, right? So we drive up the road, and this is the road that my mom and dad had the experience on. So we see my wife's cousins. I never had met them before. She's supportive, and she's heard some things, and she's starting to believe. I never had met her cousin before, and I just did the same thing. Hey, you ever seen a Bigfoot? And his demeanor changed. He said, no, but I think I've heard one a couple of times just over this ridge. And she looks at me like, that's amazing. When we're talking about, as a crow flies, not 3 miles from my first sighting, right? You got all these ridges that interconnect, and animals use those for quick getaways. They'll run a ridge, and if something spooks them, a deer, it'll take a left. They know where they're at. They know their getaway. They're avoid people and whatever predators. So I think these ridge systems, they're using them, or that I don't know if they still are, because after they tore the terrain up when I was 14, the screams and the activity slowed way down to almost, I guess, nothing, because after the last few screams I heard and felt, they were finishing up. And you got to understand, it don't sound like much to somebody in Wyoming, but here you take a couple thousand acres and clear it. You've taken away their travel, or any animal, their travel where they can stay hid. And it was pretty thick back there, and they turned them into just fields. But for the stories that I've heard talking to people, I think they didn't move too far. I think maybe north a little bit there's a Duck River with rocks and outcroppings. My wife's family, they have about 130 acres up there. It's about 20 miles from here. And we've recently had had activity. So from 14 or 15, we moved to an area not far from Simmons Ridge, but I didn't have anything happen at that location. It was always in the back of my mind. There was only one instance that I heard a tree snap with my cousin. I had killed a deer. We had to track it. It got dark on us, and there were no cows. Shouldn't have been anybody out there in the dark, way out where we were. And I always thought it could have been a mountain lion, but now going back and thinking of how it actually sounded, it would have had to have been a 200-pound something stepping on a green tree fall. And now it makes more sense that it was maybe a snap, but I don't know that. I'm not going to say that's what it was. But went all these years, didn't forget about it, but I didn't go looking for this to start with. So the only time I ever looked for tracks was when they did finish up the fields and they had moved all the dirt out. And I'm like, you know what? This is where this thing walked up through here. And if it's something this big in the woods, it's going to leave track. So I did go when that was fresh. And I think that's the only time I really looked for tracks, and I didn't find any. Okay. We fast forward, and probably 3 years ago, my son, he has some family in the south end of the county, even further south than here. And we are 25 minutes from the Alabama border. So and I've heard a lot of stuff come out of North Alabama, Northeast, especially in the hills. I hadn't hunted in years, and he was like, Dad, my uncle's going to let us hunt, and he said you could come too. I'm like, oh, okay. And it was more or less, I went as just to have an experience with him. And I was like, look, I'll carry a rifle with me. I won't be hunting. I'll just be there, and we'll carry walkies with us. And so it was 2 weeks before the season. And I'm like, do you know anything about the place? He said, not really. I said, we need to go scout a little bit. And Bigfoot's the farthest thing from my mind. We go up there, we find the water sources, we find the food, we find the fences, the holes in the fences where they travel, and we're just having a big time walking. We're not being that quiet because we're just scouting. And we get to a particular point, and I see a tree about 5.5 foot up, and it's a hardwood. Because when whatever snapped it, it splintered, and just like a high pressure snap. Being me, and I've always taught him to question and look for the answers, don't assume. So I'm looking around, and I don't see anything that fell on it. I don't see anything. At that time, the top was still there, attached. And I'm looking around. I'm like, you know what? I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I've seen some of these shows that say this is a marker. Could be a marker. And don't go past it, whatever. Maybe it was Les Stroud and those guys. But I wasn't thinking Bigfoot, but it was odd, very odd, and no reason for it, okay? So I had my phone in my pocket, my shirt pocket. I stepped past this tree, and this all happened at the same time. So Siri, which I'm scared to say it, she might wake up here on my phone, triggered, and my voice is the only thing that's supposed to trigger that. And Siri said, I don't quite understand. And I looked down in my pocket, and I grabbed the phone. As I'm grabbing the phone, about the size of your double fist, a rock comes over the cedar, up the hill, over the cedar thicket. They're not very high. And lands, I'm going to say 12 to 15 yards from us. Bounces down, and I hear it to my right. My son's looking at it. I hear it. I look up. I see the rock slowing down. But it was so much to take in. All of a sudden, now I've got my son out here, and we just had a rock thrown at us, and there's nobody out there. And you really, something that throws rock has to have a thumb or two, has to have a hand. So I didn't react right away. What I was doing, I was thinking, what is our best action here? Because any wild animal, you don't want to run. You don't want to trigger a response to get attacked or whatever. So I'm thinking, what's the best thing we need to do? My son, he's so funny. The first thing out of his mouth, he said, are we just going to ignore that we had a rock tossed at us? I'm like, no, Peyton, just calm down. Just hold on. I'm trying to figure out what we need to do. I said, so here's what we need to do. We need to walk down the hill backwards so we're facing whatever this is. And don't look up in there. Let's get away and we'll talk about this. And so we went back to the truck and we're like, what just happened? And so we started talking about the marker. I said, the tree, it was right there at the tree. And he said, what was up with Siri? I said, that's never happened before. So my question, hearing people talk about infrasound and all this, could infrasound trigger Siri? Because I've had that feeling. I've seen people where they go with the line and they measure the infrasound and they're like, oh, do you feel anything? And they're jittery and whatever. And so that's my first question was like, no, neither one of us said a word. So that's not supposed to happen. Second of all, we got the marker and then we got the rock toss. The Siri by itself wouldn't have been a big deal. The tree by itself wouldn't have been a big deal. But put together with the rock toss, it became very big deal. And it scared me but we didn't feel threatened, though. That's what we talked about. We didn't feel threatened. We talked about, should we go back? And we did. We went in before daylight. And we had put him up a stand. And a few days after that, where I hunt is not 200 to 250 yards from that spot. Where he hunts is over the ridge. It's not 150 yards. And like I said, we've never felt threatened there. And there have been times, one morning I was there, and the breeze was blowing. It was from up the hill. I don't know what direction actually that is. You pay attention to it as a hunter. Okay, we got the breeze coming this way. I knew that Peyton was good and that I was good anything up the hill. And I'm sitting there. I've been sitting there for 45 minutes. It hasn't started breaking daylight yet, but it's getting close. So fresh air, nice morning. I'm close to the spring, a water source, and I'm actually sitting blind on the ground, which I don't like doing that, but I was backed up into a bank with some trees and stuff. So I felt like I had that spot covered, keep something from walking up on me. I get a whiff of the only thing it did smell like a wet dog, but it had an element like death, decay. No, let's decay. Wet dog with decay, right? And I perked up. It's behind me, and that's where the wind was blowing. There's just a light breeze. Maybe 3 seconds. It was quick. But here's the thing. I've smelled dead animals, but if you do and the wind's blowing to you, you're going to keep smelling it, right? So I'm like, this thing is moving. Whatever this is, it's moving. And I got on the walkie, and I'm like, Peyton, I'm not trying to scare you. We've got something coming in between us that stinks like something I've never actually smelled before. And it's moving. I think it's coming to you. He never got a whiff of it, which is even more strange. And we have smelt this on more than one occasion. And he's got a whiff of it a couple times, but we've never felt threatened. And he's had some strange things, some sounds. He was by himself one day, and I got a text. I'll check up on him quite a bit because it's in the middle of nowhere. And he's 25, so he can take stuff, but you just don't. It's not smart to hunt by yourself. But as long as he checks up with me every so often and let me know when you're leaving and all that. He said, Daddy, I just heard what sounded like a monkey. He said it was the build up, ooh, 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 and then a kind of a yell. He said it wasn't a scream, and it was the direction it came from was over the same direction as the marker and the rock throw, but even further over on the other side of the hill. And he said, at first I thought it was a bull. He said, but on the beginning of it, but as it followed through with it, he said it wasn't. And he, in a little bit of his background, he's always loved animals. If you have a question about an animal, I don't care if it's in Australia, or he grew up watching Steve Irwin. The teachers loved him because they could ask him about this rare bird in Mexico, and he would be, oh yeah, that was his thing. So he's not inexperienced as far as things like, and he's really level-headed. The first thing we do is we question, what could this be first? Always, and you'll find the answer a lot of times. That's why I'm saying not everything's a Sasquatch. I really like the way he approaches things, and when he tells me something, I believe him because it's between us. It's no sensational. It's just, hey, Daddy, we might need to keep an eye on this or whatever. We've had strange things happen, and we've been there. We went back last year, and it was dry. That's the first thing we knew it was dry in our county, but that's the first thing I noticed. The spring was almost nothing. The ponds were dry. It had a totally different feel. The whole area did. We didn't hear anything. We didn't see anything. And we've been several times where we didn't. But last hunting season, after that, he's walking his ridge up to his tree stand, and I go to my spot. And we don't text each other because it lights up, right? I got a text. So when I got a text, I'm like, oh. And it's really a miracle that I actually got the text because of the signal. It was like a signal back in there. And the picture's coming through, and it took a while. And when it finally came through, I don't know, you may have seen the picture in one of the groups on Facebook, but it's the thorn tree. It really hard, really tough, no scuffs on it. And it looked like something had taken like this and broke it down. And there was probably 150, 200 of those on this ridge. And it used to be a field, and it's grown up now. And he saw it, and he snapped a picture of it, got the flash, and he like, WTH. And so after our hunt's over with, he takes me up there, and that's the first thing we do. We look around it. We look, maybe see if a tractor maybe had made that damage. I didn't think so because of the way it was done. All of the thorns, some of the thorns are 3 inches long. All of those branches and thorns are intact. So if a truck runs over something like that, they're going to knock some of those off. If a bull rubs up against it, it's going to knock some of those off. Everything was intact except that fork. And so have you ever, when we were kids, when we didn't have a lot of toys, we'd be outside all the time. When you're 7 or 8 years old, we would go and pick a sapling, climb up it a little bit, and it's not going to support your weight. So you would ride it down, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
So when one of those breaks, I'll call it a soft break. It'll bend, it'll put pressure, and it'll give way, and it'll split, but it may split in a bunch of different places or whatever. And you can tell that the pressure was from up in the tree. And then somebody wrote it down. Well, what's strange about these particular trees being a harder wood, and it looked like something just snapped it right there at that point. If you take, let's say, I may have one here. I know this is crazy. I don't know if anybody can see this or whatever, but I've got a number 2 pencil. If I take and break this thing like this, it's bending and it's going to break somewhere in here. But if I push pressure right there, I know where it's going to break. It's going to break right there. And that's a high pressure break. So that's the difference in something that's a softer wood that, so anyway, and I'm no expert. I just been in the wood and, and I'm always open to somebody educating me. I notice things like that. And if I can't explain it, I'll keep trying. But some of these I can't. And I don't know if you've heard Mike Bluler.
I haven't, no.
Okay, I help co-host with him on Red Creek Mafia on YouTube. And I heard his story on Cliff and Bobo podcast, coming home from work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there were some things he said that made me realize, okay, one thing he was talking about was the size of the forearm. He had a really close encounter, lasted a while. But the size of the forearms and the fingers looked like bananas, the size of bananas. And I'm driving home and I'm like, if that's the case, then what I thought was a tough tree break for something might not be as hard as what I thought. So I contacted him through email and can I talk to you? Because this stuff started happening. I started, there's podcasts now, of course. And he was nice enough to answer back and we hit it off. And I asked him all kind of questions like, what did this look like? What did that look like? And we've learned a lot of stuff in the last 3 months because of the guest that's come on. Because I told my story, or one of my stories, I had a friend contact me on Messenger on Facebook and said, "Hey, Raj, you remember when my brother and I lived Verona, Caney Creek, whatever?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He said, "We walked up on one." They were like 12. He said, "We walked up on one." The farmer had said, "Keep an eye out because something was stealing his calves." And so when they fished the creek down there, they would walk through and they heard some of the calves bawling and making noise. And so they walked over there and he's got his brother with him, younger brother, a couple years younger. And he said, my mind couldn't make sense of it at first, but it was a Bigfoot and he had a calf by the leg dragging it through a fence. And when it saw us, he said it looked irritated that we had seen him. And he let the calf go, walked off and turned and looked at him and did a huff, and he said, "I saw his teeth." He's close enough, 20 yards, he saw his teeth. And he stepped over the four strand of barbed wire, just stepped right over it and walked across this field. And I'm floored. I talked to him for 2 hours. I'm like, "Kevin, how come?" He said, "I didn't know everybody was laughed at me. I'm glad you told your stories. I don't feel as crazy now, but I know what I saw and nobody ever tell me."
Wow.
And this was something that he had a 30-second to a minute sighting and up close and personal. And that, I'm not the bravest person in the world. So that 200-yard cushion that I had, even though I was probably wrong, I felt like I could get to the back door quicker than he could get me, which that's how kids think. But 20 yards, I don't know if I would make it through that heart-wise. But it just confirms there are people around this country that might listen to this. It's okay now. I don't know if the shows, the negative, if you say something about Bigfoot, I mean, I've got deodorant in the
right. It's everywhere. Yeah.
Right. It's everywhere. I've got stuff people give me. I told this story And I thought, yeah, they're going to think I'm nuts. Somebody went to Branson, Missouri and brought me back this poster that's got a Sasquatch themed park there. I didn't know that.
Yeah, exactly.
And so now, but here's the problem. The problem now you run into, which is a little bit before, I didn't go looking for this. We do go out now, and I've gotten a couple situations where I've slowed down a little bit, but there are people that want to have an experience so bad that every leaf, every twig break, the other night.
Yep. I know exactly what you're talking about, Roger. Yeah.
And you don't want to, I'm sitting there telling you I saw a Bigfoot, so I can't tell another person they didn't.
Right.
I'm not going to do that. I'm going to listen to you. Now, if you show me pictures and you've been faking some stuff, I'm not going to hurt your feelings, but I'm just going, oh yeah, that's cool. But if it looks legit, I'm going to pick your brain. Hey, can you take me out there?
Yep.
So, but I think my BS meter's pretty good. Now
right.
there's some will get past you, but that's okay. But I think some of them want an experience so bad they'll see pictures, they'll find things, the pareidolia thing, but I can't say anything about that. I had a couple of things happen to me where my son, he said, "What is this?" And he circled it, and I've got a picture that I'll send you later. I had a tree fall. We had a gifting spot. We tried this. We heard these other people. So we had some activity. We had some strange sounds, strange smells, sounds for footfalls, like it coming off one of the large rocks and boom, like a 600-pound cow, but 2 feet. A lot of strange things was happening at this one location, and we would go out there at night. I used to sit outside the truck. Now I sit inside the truck. I don't. But we went back one day, and we gifted. We put some fruit and stuff out there. Well, my son and I, we were out there, and I've got it on audio, on the video, but it's hard. And I'm embarrassed because it scared me so bad that I said some very ugly words. It just came out, and I'm like, I didn't even realize it did it until we replayed it. And what happened, we went in, we found the spot where we'd had all the strange stuff, the smells and stuff at night. So we went in during the day, and it's on some family land. And we had a bag of fruit, and we had a rake with me. What I was wanting to do was put out some stuff and then rake all the leaves up and clear in case something stepped in to get it. Then I would maybe get a footprint or something like that. And as soon as we walked in, not only did we hear stuff, but we could hear stuff before we heard stuff. Like we heard, it sounded like a log was thrown, like a log that had been down for a few months. A log was thrown, and it was thrown so hard, and there's these big rocks. It's close to that river I was talking about, so a lot of the topsoil's gone. And it sounded like it was thrown against one of those rocks, and it broke. And it didn't sound like it was green. It'd been there a while. But the thing was, we were so close, we heard it pick it up. And pick up, like you pick up one end and drag it to you.
Oh, wow.
And you can hear me in the video. I'm like, wait, so before all these sounds, these big sounds, we could hear the other movement. And then we get the high pressure tree snaps, just crack. And we're talking 50 to 60 yards through the woods and just out of sight. All the stuff that's happened here has just been out of sight. Trees been, I'm going to say, I hate to even say pushed over, but what are the odds of these trees falling? And I had one, I've got it on video, where I went back by myself a couple of days later to check the fruit. And this tree that had been broken and suspended there, it decided to fall while I was videoing, fall the rest of the way. And that's where I get I hate to say this, the cloaking look figure in the picture. I didn't see it while I was there. So, but something, and my son, And everybody's looked at this video is like, it almost looked like it was pulled down, like bend up over here. And then this back end responded to it. So anyway, the couple days before, we had all this activity. We had it sounded like maybe a 30-pound boulder tossed. This, like I said, it's about 50 yards away. And all this noise, it sounded like something was irritated that we were there. But the final thing, or close to the final thing that scared me, was a series of sounds where I heard something pick up something, like a tree that had fallen or something. And then the best way I can explain it, after listening to it 50 times, is it sounded like it picked it up. I heard that. And you know how some of the tennis players grunt when they hit the tennis, or when they exert a lot of energy, or I don't know if baseball players do it, but maybe somebody with an axe, they're putting everything they've got into it, and you hear that. When I hear right as the tree or whatever it was hit another piece of wood and it broke, there was a huff so loud and so big that I could just imagine the nostrils just being massive, and it was so deep. And that's when the cuss words come out, and I'm like, oh, we may be in trouble. And here I am thinking, you idiot, you got your son out here and you done walked up in the middle of something and you may not be able to get out of it. That's how big this thing sounded. What's interesting is, of course, the video doesn't do it justice as far as the volume. But everybody we've shown this video, and they put the headphones in and they listen to it. So here's what we get. That sounds like a lion. That sounds like a bear. That sounds like all these huge mammals, right? Southern Middle Tennessee. We don't have lions. I don't know if a bear can make that sound. They're talking, but when they hear it, they know it's something big. And it's not a horse. A horse, you hear a horse, you know what a horse sounds like, right? This thing expelled so much air while it was exerting this pressure or this energy that I could almost see the nostrils it had to be huge, and it had to be big to make the noises. And we had a final tree break, but what we did, it scared me. It scared me so bad that we didn't go back for a while. But I said in my head, I told my son, you can see in the video, I said, okay, clear your mind. And I said, we're not here to hurt you. We're not here. We're just curious, and we don't want to be hurt either. We're just gifts. I didn't know if that was the right thing, but I felt like it's something I need to do. And when I did it, I don't know if it's endorphins or what it was, but I got this euphoric feeling. So I'm being cool and calm, trying to be. And I said, Peyton, what are you feeling right now? And he said, the whole feel of the woods just changed. Now, I don't know if that's power suggestion. I don't know if that made us feel better. It could be. But what we went through for 15 minutes and that ending on that, I knew we'd tick something off. I knew it. I knew this thing's not good. And we took a break. He hadn't been back. He has not been back. He's not a small guy. He can take care of himself. And he said, I'm not going back there. I did the next day, or I keep saying that, a couple of days later, and that's when the tree was either pulled down or fell down. And I don't know. I can't explain a lot of this stuff. It is good to talk to people and get their opinions of what it might be. You know, when you get that gut feeling something's wrong, I'm 52 years old. I've done some stupid stuff. I've got scars. I've got broke bones. And just before that happened, you get this feeling like, oh, I did it again. Some of this is, we started having these interactions, and I think we got a little overzealous. And we're trying to figure out some things, and I just don't want to get hurt in the process. I don't want to get him hurt in the process, or anybody. And there's so much that's happened. My wife was with me one night at the same area, and over to our right, she's on the way I park. The left side is where this area is, and she can hear and see on this right side. It's dark, good and quiet. And she said, "What is that?" "What?" And she said, "Up in that tree." And just across the drive, back in there's some trees and saplings, a few cedars, and there was a light. It wasn't fluorescent. It wasn't LED or anything that bright. It was more of like a moon, like when it's not at its brightest, not a full moon, just half or crescent or whatever. So I'm looking at it, and that's the first thing I think, what's the moon? She said, "No, it's not, because it's over there." I'm like, okay. So we're looking, and it's not pulsating. It's not, but it does get gradually bigger. It's about the size of just not quite the size of a tennis ball when I first see it, and it's not perfectly round either. And we keep watching this. Went on for 15 or 20 minutes. This is the same area. I have people say, well, that comes along with the Bigfoot. And we watch it, and I back the truck up to get different views of it. And I said, "How far do you think that's up in the tree there?" She said, "I don't know how to tell." I said, "Do you know how high a basketball goal is?" She said, "Oh, yeah." I said, "Do you think that's," in which it was, I said, "Do you think that's about the same height?" She said, "Yeah, it is." I said, "So it's not a person with a light. We're ruling that out." It got bigger, and it was misshapen, and then it come back gradually after 20 minutes, and I would move forward and backward to get better looks at it, and it just faded out. We don't know what that was. It shouldn't be there. I went a few days later, go in behind during the day and look to see if there's any trail cams, any light sources, any place where something like that could be hung up there. And it's not. There was no place. There's no tracks, the leaves. There's no disturbances. So no, it wasn't something somebody put up there, is what I'm saying. And that in itself is just strange. And then you pair it with this other activity that we've had, and we just don't know. We've been married a little over 3 years. We've been together 4. So she's so good. When we first met, let's say Skinwalker Ranch, some of the Bigfoot shows, some of the YouTube stuff, I'm like, she's gonna think I'm crazy, but she didn't. We're in Du Bois, Wyoming, 2 years ago in April. It was 2 years ago. And we go back, I think it was Tory Lake. We went to Cowboy Cafe. We got something to eat. And we had enough time to go back in here. I had actually looked it up. It was a place you could drive back, and just beautiful. Nobody back there. And I had a video going, and I made the comment, being stupid, just being extra country. I don't know if y'all know this or not, boys, but it's a Yeti country right here. And I was going to send it back to my buddies and show them just how it's hard to describe how beautiful this was and how far back, and the river, and I expected to see a grizzly or a mountain lion any second, or whatever bears they have. We go to the back. We go 9 miles back in. We turn around. We got the windows down. We're coming back out, and I'm barely going. We're looking at everything. We're in awe. And on her side of the truck, there's an ow. Now, it's not like it didn't have the volume that I had heard before. And when you get in those mountains, that mountain may look like it's a mile away. It could be 10. So I actually thought it was somebody messing with us. But then when you think about it, there were no vehicles. It might have been a hiker, right? But she looked at me and she said, she said, "Did you just hear that?" Oh, yeah, I actually did. What do you think it was? She said, "All I know, I've been watching too many of those shows with you."
Where was this again, Roger?
This was in Du Bois, Wyoming.
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah.
And
wow.
It was, I had talked to Don, my game warden friend. He said, now, Roger, don't write it off because it could have been a smaller one and it could have been 2 miles away. And I'm like, you're right. But like I said, that my first instinct is to explain things away. And because it didn't have the volume that the one I had heard several times, I just thought maybe, hopefully it was somebody, because this stuff scares me a little bit. I'm not going to be out in a tent. I talked to a guy, I got a new job, and there was a guy, one was from Minnesota and the other guy, we were in training, and the other one was from California. I didn't bring anything up. I noticed the one guy had a Sasquatch hat on. He was from Wisconsin. And the guy from California said, oh, you believe in Sasquatch? He said, oh, yeah, we found a trackway in the snow one time that was just unbelievable. And of course, here I go. My head's turning. And this guy said, I want to walk into my camp one night up close to the Sierra Nevadas. He started naming Clackamas River and Humboldt County and all this stuff. And I just keep leaning. I said, hi, nice to meet you. My name's Roger. So I knew I could talk to these guys or just learn. And they had some amazing stories. He said he didn't see it because it scared him. He stayed in the tent. But I guess he had moonlight and maybe smells and sounds. And all of his friends, he said, had experiences back in the day. So it's been a whirlwind, Jeremiah. Once I told my story, the amount of stories that I have now, and I'm telling you, there are some people that I don't know, but there are some that I've known them all my life. And some of them haven't watched the TV shows or listened to the podcast. There's the one I said, I can't say a name. So he sends me a messenger after that first show I did. Thank you for explaining things the way you did, because now what happened to me made sense, but I can't let it get out because of my job. I'm like, can you call me? So we talked on the phone for a while. He said he was on his porch, and this is not far from me. This is actually close to some activity that's been going on since the 70s. This is the same area, maybe 10-mile circle, right? He said he was out on his porch one night, rural area. His dog was there out there. He said he said he heard a scream, and it sounded like a mixture between a woman and an elephant. It's the way he, in his mind. And he said his dog peed on the porch, ran to the door, and he was trying to get in the door, and the dog was trying to get in the door. He said he almost peed the porch too. And he wondering what it was. He said, but he's the thing. He said, when you said you felt that scream, I felt it too. And he said, and it made sense when you said it. I said, let me ask you some questions. I said, do you watch Bigfoot shows? No. You listen to podcasts? No, I don't. He said, I don't know any of this stuff. I don't know. He said, but when you said this or that, it made sense. So I kept listening. Then he said 2 weeks later was opening of gun season, deer season here. They've got a little money. And so they're, where I might have been a tree stand or in a fold out seat, Ozark Trail from Walmart, they've got these nice houses with plexiglass, and it's almost too nice. And I know exactly the one he's talking about. And he said, I'll get my four-wheeler back there and hide it, and then I'd walk across the field 45 minutes before daylight. He said, and this was 2 weeks after I heard that sound. He said, I go in, I get inside, I lock the door, a little flimsy door, but it locked. And he said, there's a hickory tree. And his dad, I don't give too much away, his dad taught me how to smoke meat, and we did it the old way back then. And so they always had a lot of hickory cut and had huge smokers. And he said, there's one hickory tree he said, I always would look at it, get daylight. And I was like, oh, my daddy don't cut that down. This is such an awesome tree. And he said, I'm sitting there. He said, it's about 30 minutes or so before daylight. And I hear some grunting and growling and huffing. And he said, it sounded like something very large was upset. He said, it wasn't a bull. It wasn't a cow. It had this, he said, I just knew it wasn't, but he said that it was massive. He said, and it was in the fence row, and it was close to the hickory trees, near as I could tell. He said, so he was so scared that he took his chair and put it up against the door. He said, what I figured was it was dark, and he said, if it came in on me, whatever it was, I would feel the door moving, and then I could maybe get a shot off or whatever. He said, I was scared to death. He said, 15 minutes before daylight, he still hearing some of the noises, not as much, but it was maybe letting him know that it was still there. And then he heard a loud crash snap and didn't know what it was, and heard another noise. And then after that, it went quiet. So it's getting close to daylight. It's getting close to sunrise, right? So he said he didn't know what to do. He said he was going to get to his four-wheeler as quick as possible, but he wanted to get all the way daylight, and he wanted to make sure whatever it wasn't in the area. And he said when it got where he could see, he said there's a big branch about 10 foot up. He said it was broken, fresh snap, how bright fresh wood is. And so his first instinct was like, I wonder when that happened. And then he had just walked at an angle from his four-wheeler to this thing through the field. And he looks over, he's at 20 yards out in the field. That branch is thrown out into the field. And he said, Roger, that was 5 years ago, and I haven't been hunting since, and I'm not going back. So how do you explain, once again, for something to break something like that, it has to have thumbs, and it has to be big. I feel like I'm gushing here, but I've been inundated with stories over the past, 3 months maybe. And it got to the point where it felt like I was filling up. And I do want to listen. And I would see you share your podcast on Twitter or somewhere, and I'll be like, I got to listen to that. I'm going to share it, so I'll go back and listen to it. But there was a point where I had to take a break with Mike helping co-host that show, because there was so much information, and I'm trying to filter through what could be real and what's not. And I got full. I got just weighed down with it. And then I got sick, and I got to rest. It's a bad way to get to rest, but I slept a lot. And after I got over that, I'm refreshed. And I think I'll give some people advice that's getting into this. Go at a pace, go at your own pace, and don't try to get too much, because there are a lot of theories. And then there are a lot of people that are this side, and they'll get upset if you disagree with them. And some of it is so unreal. But like I said, I'm on a podcast with Jeremiah, and I'm telling about this stuff. And I haven't talked about the ghost and the orbs and all this stuff that I've seen in the past. And it makes me, that's why it makes me think that some of it may be tied together. And maybe some of us are, without trying, more open to things happening. I don't know. Here's a theory I have. Now, the scientist guys, I get them, but there's some people that, think about this. I don't know if, and people that are listening, think about this. There are people that mean no harm. If there is a Bigfoot, they don't want it to be killed. They don't want it to any harm. They just want to understand. A lot of those people seem to have experiences where I know people that are mean and would shoot one in a heartbeat, and they hardly ever have any of those experiences. So if they can communicate or know your feelings or know your thoughts or whatever, then they would stay away from that person, I would think. And those are the people who are like, oh, you're full of it. And if I ever saw one, I would, they tell it. They think they would anyway. But even Mike's encounter, he had the safety off, the crosshairs on his nose, and was scared. And he said he was about to pull the trigger, and there was too much emotion and more human. He said it turned his head sideways. You better don't do it. Don't do it. And he said, and this Mike's former military, and he was scared. And he said, I felt like if I pulled that trigger, I would partially be killing a human. And then he said, and I partially was scared that if I decided to pull the trigger, I might not make it out of the woods. So what he struggles with it, but he's a good guy. He's doing his show, and he's trying to get people on so he can understand it. And I think that's where a lot of us come from, is we have had experiences and we start digging, like the guy in the Jeep. His son told me, he said, ever since that happened to him, he's been everything he can watch, everything he can read. He talks about it all the time. And it's not driving him crazy. It's just, he wants to understand, how, and we have questions like one of the main questions I have, it's not paranormal. It's like, how do they take in enough protein?
Be a lot of critters in one area to support those guys.
Yeah.
It's wild. Yeah.
And so they almost have to be omnivores?
Exactly.
Protein. And then you get some people talk about the woo part of it, where their energy, and they can come through portals, and who knows? It's a lot. It's a lot to take in.
It's a lot. And you're smart in what you said earlier, where it's like, there's so much in this field right now that you have to pace yourself, and it is okay to step away for a bit if you find yourself being overwhelmed. That is a smart thing to do. It's not smart when you're not aware that needs to be done. But I do have a few questions for you that have come up while you've been talking. The different situations you've had, have you noticed that these have all taken place in one county?
Except for the Wyoming, yes. There's one that's close to another county, depending on what hill you're on. But yeah, the Marshall County, Tennessee, I'll go ahead and say it, because I've got 5 or 6 people right now that I'm in contact with. Oh, there's probably a dozen that's actually told me, but there's about a half a dozen that we communicate about things that have happened in the past, and we talk about people that we've all known that things have happened to, and then you'll forget things. I have a very good friend. I used to hang around him. He's a little older than me. Now, he's one of those macho guys. He's not going to say anything to make himself look bad or crazy. His dad has passed away, but I would believe anything to come out of his mouth. It was just because of the type of person he was. And he wasn't kin to me, but he gave me advice. He was just a no frills country guy that had great listening skills. He would listen to you. If he thought he needed to say something, he would. If he wouldn't butt into your business, and he was just a good man. And so when Matt told me the story, I was about 90% on it. But then when Eddie, his dad, told me he heard all of it, and he saw Mac running, and he's never seen him that scared in his life. He was about 13 or 14. But what happened in that situation, Mac hunted the fence line up behind their house, and he had a single shot 20 gauge. He hunted everything with it back then. And he'd climb up in this hackberry tree and get out on this limb and sit there. And he said he saw some movement coming along the woods line, which there's a little grass out there in the field. It wasn't a big field. And first thing he think was deer coming, turkey, something. And he said, and that's another thing, there's some people that can't get out, and I understand that. and they want to know things. So this is why I put little tidbits in like this. People that have been out in the woods or been around farm animals or been out, even a zookeeper or somebody that studies all that, they can see an animal from a long distance and tell you what it is by the way it's moving, by its gait, by its bouncing, its smoothness. A cat, back will bend certain ways. The coyotes will prance a little bit, and they're lighter on their feet than a wolf. And it just, so you identify things pretty fast. He said the first thing he noticed was it was something about 4.5 to 5 foot tall, and it was moving, but it was doing this. He said the head was side to side, and it was hunkered over, and what is that? Because now this guy, he's been around all these animals. And at first he sees it, he don't know what it is, so he's trying to identify it. It's getting closer to him, but the wind is coming from behind Mac to a certain point up in the woods. This thing is coming around, and it hasn't got to that point where it could wind him yet, and it's focused on the edge of the woods. And he said then he gets a good look at it as it gets closer. He said it was 4.5 to 5 foot tall. He said it looked like a monkey. He said the hair was clumped, greasy and clumped, where in tufts where you could see skin under. And he said that's when he got really scared. And so he got his gun up and ready, but he wasn't going to make a noise. He's just going to let it pass by. And that was his instinct, just to stay still and let it go. He said he said, I knew the wind was behind me, and I thought, oh no. And he said it got to that point, and it threw its nose up in the air, sniffed a few times, and he said when it turned and looked, it locked eyes with him, and it showed its teeth. And now back then I didn't know whether to ask if it had canines or whatever. I'm just listening to the story. So he said it snarled, and it made it mad, and it said it came to him. And it was making some noises. I don't remember what noises he said it made, but he said, I'm thinking, can I get down out of this tree and get home before this? We're talking 40 yards. And he made the decision that he couldn't. Now, what happens next? He said he felt bad about it, but he was forced into it, he thought. He said he pulled the gun up and he put it on the chest and squeezed the trigger, and he heard it thump. He said it started rolling. It grabbed its chest, started screaming and rolling. He said it sounded like a monkey. Now, it could have been. I don't know what it was, but he got down. He's running. Now, he's built like me. I'm a bigger guy. One of us running, don't ask any questions. Try to beat us. But so he's running. And he said he takes he single shot, puts one in it, and throws it over his back and fires recklessly back that way. Puts another one in it. Yeah. And so he gets to the fence. He's trying to get his fat tail over the fence. And his daddy's like, what is going on? He said, I just shot a monkey. And he said, you could hear it screaming. Eddie said, I could hear it screaming. It's just right behind the house. And he said, boy, let's get in the house. And they never went up there to see. Now that's not, as a crow flies, 3 miles from where I saw mine, but it was a lot bigger. And going back to that sighting, there was a limb that came out. It came out over the field and drooped down and curved back up. This thing walked, when it stopped, it was under this, right? So I told my dad, I said, Daddy, it was almost as tall as that limb. I said, it was about 6 or 8 inches under that limb, top of the head was. That couldn't have been Buford. He said, there's no way. You know how far up that is? I said, yeah, I do. I saw. We went up there with a tape measure, and whatever it was had to be around 7.5 foot tall. So we did get a measurement. And he was questioning. He said, but he kept saying, there's no way. There's no way. And like I said, I'd seen him walk, and he was 5'8"-ish, and I knew what he looked like up there. And this thing would have broke him in half. But anyway, I wished I had known. Maybe I don't, but I wished I had known what to look for. I wish I'd have known. Like the other night, we had a quiet night. There wasn't a lot going on. We had some barred owls back and forth. And some people say sometimes they get mimicked by whatever. We can do calls like that with our mouth. And sometimes when it gets quiet, we'll get them active just to get something going on. But then you'll hear some strange stuff like a barred owl that's on the ground. It doesn't sound exactly like a bird, but I don't know. But there you go. You put all the things that happened together, and it makes a little more sense that it could be something like that. But so I realized that I haven't done anything to get any responses. And I said, hey, so let's go back. So we had frogs making their noises. We had whippoorwill or whatever, a bird. It was going nuts. We had some sounds going on and just listening. And then it got quiet. Just, how it happens sometimes when a predator comes in. It could have been coyotes, whatever, mountain lions, whatever. It just get quiet. But I wasn't really thinking that. And like I said, I don't know what this was. But I'm like, you know what? This would be a good time I told my wife, I said, I'm gonna do 3 claps out the window and let's listen. And her hearing, I have to be careful. I can't mumble under my breath because she can hear birds breaking seeds in her bird feeder. And she's a good one to have with you if you need a warning. But so I did 3 loud claps and quit. I didn't hear anything. And she turned and she said, you just got to clap back over here. I said, wait a minute, hand clap? She said, yes. Yeah. How many? It was just 1. And I don't know. I do know that there's nobody out there. And if she tells me it was a hand clap, I'm going to go with her hearing. But after that happened, there was some strange sounds that she couldn't identify. But it wasn't a lot. But we say that's not a lot because we've had so much happen at times that you just get a response back. I don't know what that could be. I don't know what could clap other than a person. But anyway, yeah, there's so much more. I could go on.
Roger, Marshall County is having some things go on. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I do want to ask real quick. I keep coming back in my mind. We were talking about how your son was hunting and he heard what he thought was a monkey sound in the woods. Yeah. Have you guys ever been back to that area?
Yes. I've got a video. I've got my YouTube page. It's not a whole lot on it.
Oh, okay. Cool.
It's not and we did a walkabout, and it takes a while because of the ridges, and I'm not an athlete, so we have to take time. And we went behind. This was just, I'm going to say this was 2.5 months ago, because after I had told my story, and it just a couple weeks in, I thought it would be fun to get some video and show people where we were at. So I said, here's what we want to do. I said, first of all, we're not going to be quiet because I don't want to slip up on anything. I want everything to know we're here. The second thing, I want to go behind that clump of cedar trees where the rock came from to see how something could have gotten away or hid from us, or where it could have been standing. And another thing, I said, where you heard, he said it was like a monkey gorilla.
Mm.
He said it was a classic build up and the
yeah.
and whatever. And so I said, we're going to go back on top of that ridge and we're going to look over and see what's there. And he's got I'm 52. I'm not totally out of the tech stuff. He draws this app up. It tells us exactly where we're at, who owns what, and where the houses are.
I bet it's Onyx.
And I'm like,
I use that too. It's great.
It is.
Yeah.
How far something is.
Yeah.
And who owns it. And what's scary is I believe it has the owner's phone number. here
it's pretty intense. Yeah, it's intense.
So we did go back there and we looked off the ridge to where it could have been. And as far as we could see, you would see a speck of white here, there, houses just sparsely through this valley. And then another ridge way over there and just nothing. Wow. Just nothing. And behind the cedar trees, I don't see how, whatever it was, it had to stay put. I don't see how with the terrain and the leaves and I think it would have exposed itself. And maybe that's why it threw a rock at us. It was last resort. We were getting close. And if we had walked 15 more yards or 20 more yards, we might have seen something we might not wanted to. But so maybe we pressured it to do that, to have that response without knowing. So it would have had a pretty long run up the hill, or anybody that was back there. So it didn't have an escape route. So that's what I was telling Peyton. I'm like, we may have pressured it into doing that. And then, but once you get up on top of the ridge, you can be in some of these hollows really fast. You could get some distance between you if it was a person, and especially like deer. We know that. We know how they do. So it just makes sense that any animal would use the ridges in the same way. He still goes by himself sometimes. It's just, it worries me. Even though I'm confident that he'll do the right thing, and he's learning that you don't just shoot first. We had that scary thing happen. And when I said clear your mind, he actually set his rifle down. I didn't tell him to. He just, for some reason, he set it down and did his hands like this. And I guess we're so in tune. But anyway,
wow.
He's heard some strange noises and stuff. But like I said, we talked about it and I said, have you ever felt threatened? He said, no. And Kevin, my buddy that saw the one trying to get the calf, he made a comment, and it rung true. Somebody asked him on the show, they're like, did it keep you from going hunting? Did it keep you from going fishing? Did it scare you? He said, he's more country than I am, if you can believe that. He said, the way I figured it, if he's there, what I saw, he's always been there, and he's never bothered me before. And of course, he's saying because we all think Bigfoot.
Right.
And he said, so I don't let it bother me, because if he wanted to get me, he could have got me that day because I was right there.
Sure.
So, that's comforting. Now you get to talking to some of these people with the dog men and stuff, then you get on a totally different.
It's saddle up partners when you start in. Yeah. I mean, you can go far down the road, Roger. You're aware of that. It's not just Bigfoot, but man, this has been a enjoyable chat, and you guys got some stuff going on down in Marshall County, Tennessee, and I'm definitely going to be keeping up to date with you. Roger, do you mind taking a few minutes to share how people can keep up to date with what you got going on? Also, if they're like, man, I've got something that happened in Marshall County, Tennessee, how can they get in touch with you? It sounds like they need to let you know.
Well, I set up an email like all of us do.
Nice. Yep.
You want to keep it separate from your business.
Exactly.
But it's squatchinholler. That's without a G. And it's OLER. And that's at gmail.com. So I wanted something to be memorable. And so that Squatchinholler could be anywhere. So yeah, if you have anything, I'd be glad to listen. If you're in this area, we're not far from Moore County, which is where Jack Daniels is. And there are ridges where you can get on these ridges and go forever. And people like Davey Davy Crockett. Yeah, Davy Crockett was just over, not far from here, where he lived on Bean Creek. And there's a lot of history in this area. And, a lot of Native American mounds that people really don't know about. One of our favorite pastimes, when somebody would work the ground up for tobacco or whatever with kids, it would rain and we would go just fill our pockets with arrowheads, And there's so much history in this area. And I just did not know that there was Bigfoot history.
Yeah.
Like I said, I could probably come up with half a dozen more pretty cool stories, but I know we've been on a while. So
you could probably write a pretty good book too, Roger. Just saying. But hey, I'll just put that out there. But man, it's been fun chatting with you. I'm going to be keeping tabs on you, like I said, and I think we'll be chatting sometime in the future too.
And
maybe catching up with you. All right. Yeah.
I really appreciate, because it helps. And anybody out there, if Jeremiah contacts you and wants you to tell your story, don't be bashful. We're all here. We're here for you. It helps you feel better. And if you're in Marshall County, Tennessee, or somewhere else, your friends might not even hear this, but help him out. Share it. Share the podcast with everybody, because you never know what kind of stories you're going to hear from your friends that they were scared to tell you.
That's great. Thank you, Roger. I appreciate that. And man, keep doing good work. And thank you so much for hanging out tonight, Roger.
Oh, it's been fun. I'm just glad we finally got to do it. But I really appreciate it. It does help.
Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed, share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com or pass on my email. Here's the list. All right, I'm going to use this space this week to announce that I'll be at the Sasquatch Summerfest in Oak Ridge, Oregon as an attender. I won't be presenting or anything, but I'll be hanging out, trying to interview people that have had Bigfoot encounters. If you're from the Oak Ridge, Oregon area or surrounding and you've had a Bigfoot experience, please contact me directly, bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Also, Priscilla was nice enough that if you get your tickets through sasquatchsummerfest.com and use code Bigfoot Society, you can get 50% off the cost of your tickets, which is a big amount. So code Bigfoot Society to get 50% off your tickets, sasquatchsummerfest.com, and helps out the podcast as well. A special thank you to all the Bigfoot Society Patreon and YouTube channel members. It's your support that helps keep the show going, and I extremely appreciate it. Here at Bigfoot Society, we're headed to the moon, and here's a current update about going full-time. So here we go. As of 5/22, we are now at 202 patrons out of 824 needed. That's 24.51%, almost a quarter of the way there, guys. Brings us down to 622 left to join the Patreon. So a huge thank you to Barbara, Gregory, Dana, Craig, Jeff, Steve, Ricky D, Norm, Megan, Dan, Daddy Chatty, Joe, Eber, Ike, Jules, Josh, Ryan, Todd, Nathan, Gabe, Bill, Lucky, Megan, William, Bobby Joe, and Inger for joining recently. If you want to join in the fun, you can join over at patreon.com/The Bigfoot Society. I'll see you there. And again, thanks for listening.
I can get on here and we can tell our stories. Maybe there's somebody else out there listening that's too afraid to tell their story. Maybe this will give them the courage to come out and not feel so bad about it. Who cares what anybody thinks? I know what I saw. I know what's out there. That's all I care about.
Please let people know. Please let them know. If you ever see one of these things, you need to tell. Because if you don't, then shame on you. You know? Shame on you.
Wait, there's more. Monsterfest 2 is coming up soon in beautiful Canton, Ohio, and I will be there doing a live podcast. If you've ever wanted to meet Bigfoot Society in person, this is the year to do it. My special guest in the live podcast episode will be Justin from Cryptids of the Corn. You will not want to miss this live episode. And then you can hang out with me at Monsterfest. You can go to smalltownmonsters.com to get your tickets. Pre-sale tickets are $20.50, and tickets at the door will be $25. But kids 12 and under are free. How many places can you go to where kids 12 and under are free? Not many. New this year are the live workshops. I'm excited about this. Extremely excited. How to cast a footprint. How to collect DNA in the woods. Ghost hunting tools 101. How to do research. Also, there's going to be food trucks outside this year, and new guests, new speakers, people you won't. I mean, the coolest thing about last year is that I got to meet people I was not expecting to be there. People like Les Odell, John Hickenbottom, really cool Bigfoot people that I never would have thought that I would have met before, and Seth Breedlove made it happen by making this incredible place for the community to get together. Monsterfest in Canton, Ohio, June 28th through 29th. Guys, do not miss this year. If you missed last year, don't miss this year. Head on over right now to smalltownmonsters.com. I hope to see you there.